Good day everyone, this is Enraged Eggplant and welcome to Dungeons and GURPS. If you are familiar with GURPS, you probably can safely close this video and lose nothing of value, because what I'm going to do is discuss mechanical differences between D&D and GURPS. First of all, I'm going to talk from the position of D&D 3.5, but as far as I recall, 5e works similarly in some ways. I guess this is a good place as any to mention that GURPS does not really have the so-called edition wars. Every edition of GURPS is a refinement of its predecessor, and there is no reason to, for example, start with the 3rd edition. If you've played it for your entire life, then sure, keep playing. Practically everything in terms of mechanics was officially updated from the 3rd edition to the 4th edition, which is the most current one. And there is no plan at all for the 5th edition to happen, at least in the foreseeable future. There are some books that were not updated, but most of them are setting books, and those can be used in any edition and do not really need an update. The next meta thing before I get to the mechanics is the lack of an SRD. D&D and Pathfinder have online system reference documents that make games more accessible and technically free, only to some degree for D&D and completely free for Pathfinder. GURPS has nothing of this sort. You'll have to get the books, but you won't need that many of them. And there is a GURPS Lite that is something of a free introduction to GURPS, but I would advise against using it. In my opinion, it fails to properly show off what GURPS is. If GURPS Lite was my introduction to GURPS, I would never have gotten interested in this system. At the start of the character generation section of the player's handbook, we have abilities. D&D has 6 abilities: Strength, Dexterity, Constitution, Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma. GURPS only has 4 primary attributes: Strength, Dexterity, Intelligence, and Health. While in D&D, hit points are based on class hit die, level, and constitution, in GURPS hit points are based on strength. It used to be health based in the 3rd edition. GURPS also has secondary characteristics, such as will, perception, hit points, fatigue points, basic speed, and basic move. Will and perception are based on intelligence by default, but decoupling them from it is a very common house rule. You might have noticed that GURPS does not have the charisma attribute. In D&D, charisma is something of a combination of physical appearance and sociability, but in GURPS, reaction modifiers are much more specific. You can set your appearance, have good social skills, reputation, social regard. There are many traits that affect how others react to you, including the one called charisma. The bonuses and penalties, of course, are applied in different situations, and this allows you to make many so-called face characters that are very distinct from each other, not just pump up your charisma stat as high as possible and buy appropriate skills. The next section is race. Races in GURPS are just packages of traits, be they attributes, advantages, or disadvantages. Depending on the game, they might be inaccessible otherwise. Also, unlike in D&D, where all races are made equal, if we disregard the level adjustment from D&D 3.5, each race costs a set number of points that depends on what the race actually gives you. The baseline is human, that does not cost anything at all. Next up are classes and levels, both of which simply do not exist in GURPS. GURPS is a point-buy system where you construct your character out of traits, positive or negative, that cost points. However, you may be limited to an occupational template, if, for example, you're playing GURPS Dungeon Fantasy, but that exists specifically to emulate the D&D experience. I don't like templates. Nonetheless, while you can discard class as a mechanical concept, you can keep it as just an idea. If you want to make a sorcerer, for example, you are free to do it in any way you want, without the constraints imposed by the predetermined set of class features. So instead of being a level 5 sorcerer in GURPS, you are a 200-point character that can cast spells. Obviously, this allows for infinite customization, but may lead to a choice paralysis. Also, since there is so much you can do, you can easily create a broken character. This is something GURPS haters like to talk about. But why would you create a broken character? I think this is a mindset problem. I do not want to sound stuck up, but you have to adopt a more mature mindset that if you want to play a good game or play at all, you have to make a character that will be fun to play, a real character and not a broken build from an optimization subforum. By default, GURPS is not balanced and it cannot really be balanced, but it's the job of the GM and the players to make it balanced. The next chapter is skills. While in D&D skills are something of a secondary thing, in GURPS they play a very important role. In GURPS, skills represent what your character can do, from speed reading to sword swinging to meditating. Skills have levels that are tied to the controlling attributes that vary from skill to skill and sometimes from application to application. But if you do not know a certain skill, it does not mean that you can never use it. There is a system of defaults that lets you use a skill at a default, basing it on another skill or an attribute with a penalty. So if you do not have this two-handed sword skill, you can still swing one using dexterity -4. GURPS encourages breadth, not depth when it comes to skills. You might say that feats do not exist in GURPS, but they can be represented by certain advantages, skills or techniques. Just look at the power-ups from GURPS Dungeon Fantasy. They are advantage packages that basically are feats. Alignment, a very contentious topic in D&D, does not exist in GURPS, but you can make it exist. If you want it, of course. But that's a topic for another video. Magic and spellcasting, if you watch my previous video, work the way you want them to work. GURPS has a variety of pre-made magic systems for you to choose from, and even has supplements that not only allow, but encourage you to design your own magic system. I find that sorcery and other variants of magic as powers works the best for the D&D style games. But again, this is a topic for another video. And the only thing that is left is combat. Basic attack bonus, full attack, forget it. In my opinion, GURPS probably has the best combat system in all tabletop RPGs. It can be made as complex as you want, but even in its most basic form presented in GURPS basic set characters, it is much more detailed and fun than what it is in D&D. I strongly suggest using the expanded combat system from GURPS basic set campaigns and GURPS martial arts, unless you hate fun, of course. While in D&D you are limited to just an attack and a set of combat maneuvers that are either underwhelming or even locked behind class features like in 5e, a GURPS character can do anything, or at least attempt to do anything. A quick defensive sword thrust to the knee and an axe swing to the face will all work differently both for the attacker and for the defender. Contrary to the popular belief, GURPS is not a reality simulator. However, everything is grounded in reality. So if one could attempt something in real life, one can do it in GURPS too. You don't make an abstract attack and detract HP. You evaluate the enemy, make a deceptive thrust to circumvent his defenses and penetrate the weak point of his armor. It just feels very real and visceral. I've never had as much fun playing out combat as in GURPS. It is so fun and immersive that even if you make a couple of combatants in 5 minutes and throw them against each other, you'll have a good time. Great combat stunts feel much better and rewarding when they are actually performed instead of being just a flashy description of an abstract attack. Aside from all that, I have to mention the disadvantages, and I don't mean the disadvantages of the system, but disadvantages as in negative traits. Remember the flaws that you could take in D&D 3.5 with Unearthed Arcana? GURPS has something like that, but as a central mechanic. While there is a large list of disadvantages that range from liking color green to being blind, I will have to say the following, and not in my own words, but in the words of an anonymous poster from TG, because he put it to words much better than I ever could. A character's personality is usually defined by flavor in other RPGs. In GURPS, you can have your character's personality mechanically enforced through these advantages, and you get rewarded character points for it. Some might find it needlessly restrictive to be forced to roleplay your character in a certain way, but for characters that were going to have these personality traits anyway, it's just free points for the player. The real benefit of personality disadvantages is for min-maxers and munchkins that just want to win and might neglect roleplay, just focusing on their stats. For these kinds of players, if they want to be as effective as possible, they need to take disadvantages for the extra points, and most of these will likely be personality disadvantages, which they will be forced to roleplay in certain situations. GURPS literally incentivize roleplaying with its game mechanics. And that's all for this video, thank you for watching and see you next time.